Good evening and thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business and I'm Paul Graney. With the last presidential debate happening tonight, we have the latest on the Hunter Biden email scandal. We also compared Trump and Biden's energy plans. Twitter and Facebook censored the Hunter Biden story as it broke. Why did they do it? We have the latest job numbers and they don't look too bad. And Goldman Sachs pleads guilty to foreign corruption charges in the 1MDB scandal. The final presidential debate will take place tonight. You can watch it live on ntd.com from 9 p.m. Eastern. Foreign policy isn't one of the formal topics tonight, but it's probably what most people want to hear about. We have the very latest on the Hunter Biden email scandal later in the show. The topics that will be discussed are COVID-19, race, national security, American families, and climate change. Trump and Joe Biden have very different views on energy. Nicholas Loris, a deputy director at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, just released a new report on Biden's plan. He says Biden is more focused on decarbonization, while Trump is focused on energy dominance. I asked Loris if Trump's plan puts the environment at risk.
No, I don't think so. The reality is we can have economic growth, energy production, and environmental protection. And a lot of times economic growth and environmental progress go hand in hand, that we can continue to innovate, to invest in newer, cleaner energy sources and technologies. And the more we have open markets, the more we are going to have that economic growth and environmental progress, not just in the United States, but also around the world as we can export cleaner technologies to the rest of the world. One of the concerns is that if we stop the production of coal, oil, and natural gas in the United States, that's not going to stop the consumption of these resources, neither in the United States or around the world. So what you're going to have is a lot of offshoring where the production of these resources is going to take place in countries around the world where the environmental and public safety standards are not as rigorous as those in the United States. And when you factor in some of the unintended consequences of restricting access to energy resources, there's a good case to be made that we could be worse off environmentally if we are not fracking, if we are not producing oil here in the United States.
And you mentioned innovation. In your new report, you did mention on the Biden plan could open the door for more innovation and competition in energy markets, which could generate both economic and environmental benefits, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the bright spots of the Biden platform is that we want more competition and innovation in the energy sector. Whether that's through conventional sources of energy or nuclear or hydro or renewables, there's a really good opportunity to capture those markets and continue to have the innovation that we have. This really shouldn't be about being pro-fossil fuel and anti-renewable or pro-renewable and anti-fossil fuel. It should be about being pro-market and pro-consumer. And there's a lot of opportunities to open up market access, to use the Department of Energy's national laboratories as hubs of innovation to get more bang for our buck in terms of taxpayer dollars. And that's ultimately going to trickle down to the consumer. So I'm encouraged by some of the language in the platform that says we need more competition and we need open access for renewables to compete. And I completely agree.
Thanks, Nicholas. And in other news, one of Hunter Biden's former business partners, Tony Bobulinski, dropped a bombshell today. He confirmed he was part of an email conversation involving Joe Biden's son Hunter and Chinese business people. He says the email is real and that it involves Joe Biden as well. The email was published by the New York Post last week. It was about a partnership between the Biden family and a Chinese energy firm called CEFC. The Chinese company is now defunct. The message was written by a Hunter Biden associate on May 13, 2017. It detailed proposed payout packages and equity shares for the partnership. One part reads, "At the moment, there's a provisional agreement that the equity will be distributed as follows." Then we have a list of numbers and name initials. The number appears to be the percentage of equity shares. At the bottom of the list, it reads 10 Jim and 10 held by H for the big guy. Bobulinski told the Epoch Times the big guy is Joe Biden and the Jim referred to is James Biden, Joe Biden's brother. The email's date was 4 months after Biden left the White House. Bobulinski said he doesn't have a political axe to grind and that the few political donations he did make went to Democrats. A research of the Federal Election Commission database matches the claim. Trump says he is going to bring Bobulinski to tonight's debate. And big tech's censorship of the New York Post has almost become the bigger story. The paper's Twitter account is still locked over a week after the stories dropped. A new book uncovers how and why big tech companies censor. It's called Deleted. NTD's Patrick Hayden spoke with the author to get his view on what's going on.
The New York Post's story about Hunter Biden's purported laptop have gone viral. That's despite big tech's effort to block and prevent the story from being shared. We spoke to investigative tech reporter Alan Bakari. His new book, Deleted, details big tech's efforts to censor political views.
So it's not surprising to me last week to see the tech giants intervening essentially on behalf of the Biden campaign to protect them from a story that we now know is very well sourced. It's not disinformation. It's all backed up.
He says that this type of censoring is happening all the time to smaller accounts, but it's different here because the New York Post is a major publication.
It did actually backfire on the tech giant, so they couldn't suppress it. There were too many other ways for it to get out, too many other ways for people to talk about it, and that resulted in the story being shared more widely than it probably would have been without the censorship.
He likens what big tech's been doing since the last election to how an authoritarian regime works.
It's actually very similar, I think, to the Chinese social credit score, which ranks you based on your based in large part to your conformity to the values of the Chinese Communist Party.
He believes Silicon Valley's values are solely to the left and don't match those of the American people, which are varied. He said that everyone should be taking this issue seriously because there's never been a time in human history where so much power over political discourse has fallen into the hands of people who are completely unaccountable.
And Senate Republicans voted today to authorize subpoenas for Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. Senate Judiciary Committee motion comes amid growing conservative criticism of the tech companies. Specifically, Republicans are unhappy about content moderation decisions. Some GOP members have called them a form of election interference. Zuckerberg and Dorsey are already scheduled to testify voluntarily before the Senate Commerce Committee on October 28th. U.S. stocks gained ground on Thursday, all three major indexes closing higher. At closing, the Dow rose nearly 153 points or 0.54%. S&P 500 gained about 18 points or 0.52%. The Nasdaq added over 21 points or 0.19%. Economic data surprised to the upside today as jobless claims fell more than expected. We have some information on that in just a moment. And existing home sales blew past estimates to a more than 14-year high. The number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits fell by 55,000 last week to 787,000. It's the lowest level since March. It's well below what economists predicted, which was around 860,000. The drop in weekly jobless claims suggest people are either being recalled to old jobs or finding new ones. But it also likely means that some have used up their regular state benefits and have transitioned to other programs. There were 23 million Americans getting some form of unemployment assistance in the week ended October 3rd. It compares to only 1.4 million at the same time last year. Quite the difference, wow. And American and Southwest Airlines have both reported deep losses in the third quarter, as you would expect. But they say they'll lose less in the coming months as leisure and travel hopefully increases. American lost $2.4 billion. Southwest lost over $1 billion. It's its biggest loss ever. Southwest currently blocks middle seats for social distancing, but it says it will unblock those seats in December, citing some recent research. It shows the combination of masks and air filtration makes the risk of breathing in COVID-19 particles on a plane virtually non-existent. American Airlines is selling all its available seats. And the latest on the 1MDB scandal. A Goldman Sachs subsidiary pleaded guilty on Thursday and agreed to pay more than $2.9 billion in a foreign corruption probe. The Department of Justice filed criminal charges against Goldman and its Malaysian unit, charging each with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act.
These charges stem from Goldman Sachs' central role in a massive global scheme to loot billions of dollars from the government-run Malaysian investment fund known as 1MDB, and the subsequent use of those funds by senior Goldman bankers and their co-conspirators to pay billions of dollars in bribes to senior government officials around the world.
Goldman Sachs Malaysia pleaded guilty to the charges in federal court in Brooklyn today. Its parent company, the Goldman Sachs Group, has entered into an agreement with the DOJ, deferring prosecution for 3 years if certain conditions are met. In addition, several current and former top executives will have to return millions of dollars to the company. Rabbit says senior Goldman bankers played a central role in the scheme. 2 Goldman Sachs executives have also been personally charged for fraud. One has pleaded guilty, and the other will stand trial next year. The $2.9 billion includes payments to U.S. and overseas regulators. Goldman had previously breached a $3.9 billion settlement with the Malaysian government. And still to come this evening, small businesses in Europe fear for the future. New government restrictions are making some wonder if there'll be more lockdowns. Welcome back. A new survey suggests over half of small and medium-sized businesses in Europe and the United States fear for their survival in the next 12 months. That's 2/3 of European workers. The report was compiled in August before a recent surge in virus cases even, so future prospects could be even worse.
Consulting firm McKinsey released a survey Thursday that includes more than 2,200 companies from 5 countries: France, Germany, Italy, Spain and Britain. It says that 55% of businesses expect to shut down by September next year if their revenues remain at current levels. Reports of virus case accelerations and increased lockdown measures across Europe may cause the outlook to be even worse than the survey suggests. At the current trajectory, 1 in 10 small and medium-sized companies are expected to file for bankruptcy within 6 months. Small and medium-sized business enterprises, or SMEs, are defined as those with 250 or fewer employees. In Europe, they employ over 90 million people, and their small size makes them vulnerable to cash flow crisis. In Spain, for example, 83% of the 85,000 businesses that have collapsed since February employ fewer than 5 workers. The IMF said in its blog this week, policymakers need to do whatever it takes to contain the pandemic and its economic damage, and not withdraw support prematurely to avoid repeating the mistakes of the global financial crisis. The co-author of the survey, Zdravko Mladinov, said, "For companies, policies need to go beyond liquidity support and ensure that insolvent but viable firms can remain in business." He said that measures are required to allow the restructuring of debt or to make equity available to viable firms.
And small businesses here in the United States are unfortunately in the same boat. Half may permanently close. I asked Daniel Akaya earlier, what can we do? He's the chief economist at the Tressis Hedge Fund.
The first thing that can be done is to understand that the biggest risk right now is on the very small businesses, small shops, small restaurants, all those businesses that are owned by maybe 1 person with 1 employee, maximum 2. Those are the ones that are falling like dominoes, and the governments are doing very little about it. Why? Because most of the measures that governments, not most actually, in the European Union, in the Eurozone, the measures implemented by governments are all aimed at giving more credit to business. But these businesses don't have access to credit. So what needs to be done is a comprehensive package that looks at the working capital requirement of very, very small businesses and exonerates of taxes those businesses for a period of 1 year to allow them to survive. That needs to be done urgently, because if they continue with massive stimulus packages aimed at corporations that can access credit, that are aimed at government spending, we're going to go to and make the same mistakes that the European Union made in the 2008 crisis, which is that you have a massive stimulus plan that doesn't get close enough to help those that are actually suffering the most, which are small businesses.
And obviously, the small businesses are struggling so much, but we see other businesses, larger businesses, online businesses who are actually thriving. Is it not a case of, well, this is just, as you might put it, creative destruction, that is just a natural thing that we need to let happen?
No, not really, because creative destruction is when the process of obsolescence happens to different businesses because the management or the strategy is wrong and is simply and they die because they're not able to adapt to an environment that is created by the forces of the open economy. This is not an environment created by the forces of the open economy. This is a government forced shutdown and an environment in which the governments that did not take the measures that were needed at the beginning of the pandemic are now implementing even worse measures of economic impact that has very long-lasting ramifications. So, of course, there will be some businesses that will disappear due to technology and to innovation. Absolutely, they will. And that is not a problem. But the majority of the businesses that are falling these days haven't done anything wrong.
And if we continue down this path, Daniel, if we do see what these reports are predicting, how bad will it be? How significant are small businesses to Europe or here in the US?
Small businesses are critical for any developed economy, for any economy in general. If we look at job creation, small and newly created businesses are the biggest drivers of job creation in the United States or Europe. That is why the measures that the United States government implemented were directly straight to provide funds to small businesses and to households, because it was critical to keep the services sector and the economy alive. And it was not going to happen if small businesses collapsed like a domino. In the Eurozone, most of the stimulus is going to companies that already had access to credit. So there are measures for them, that's fine, but small businesses are absolutely critical for any economy.
Let's hope they can do something for them then, Daniel. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
And still to come this evening. Millennial renters flock to Austin, Texas. We'll hear from a Texas-based real estate company about what it has to offer. And it looks like Disneyland won't be opening anytime soon. It's bad news for local businesses that depend on the tourists. We take a look at how it's affecting the local community after the break. Welcome back. Move over Seattle. Austin, Texas is taking over the top spot for young renters this year. NTD's Phil Zoe spoke with a Texas-based property company to find out more.
Austin, Texas has taken the #1 spot for millennial renters in 2020. That's according to data from RentGrow. Talking about the past 5 years collectively, Seattle and San Francisco are still on top, but Austin, Houston, and San Antonio, all located in Texas, rounded out the top 5. An Austin-based real estate company tells us, why wouldn't you move to Texas? The prices are some of the best you can get.
The price of renting the equal apartment in Austin, Texas, in comparison to San Francisco is literally a fraction of the price.
Rastegar says in some cases, rent prices could be up to 75% cheaper than the bigger cities, and people are catching on.
There's at least 160 people a day moving to Austin, Texas. Texas is a very business-friendly state, okay? There's no state income taxes. It's fair weather climate. It's geographically centered.
He says all the tech companies are already there. It makes sense millennials are following along.
So you have the fastest internet in the world here. You have Google's second largest office, Facebook's second largest office, Oracle's second largest office. Tesla is now building the largest gigafactory in the world here.
Rastegar says Texas is just getting started. Apple is also working on a new $1 billion campus in Austin coming in the next 2 to 4 years. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
And earlier this week, California's top health official said it still isn't safe for Disneyland and other big theme parks to reopen. They're bracing for an even longer shutdown, and so are local businesses.
The streets are empty near Disneyland. In any normal year, they'd be packed with tourists. One of the victims of the extended Disneyland shutdown is Rick Cerny. He owns a Subway store across the street.
It was just an unbelievably emotional day yesterday. I couldn't believe how we were anticipating the governor to allow Disneyland to open, and instead he slapped us up, the whole entire neighborhood down, and saying no.
Rick's business has dropped from $3,000 a day to just $300. He feels he can go on for at most 4 to 5 months.
Just my business and these businesses around me and the hotels were put here just solely to ride the coattails of Disneyland's success. And without Disneyland there, we have no really reason to put this business here. I wouldn't have put it in here.
Anaheim, home to Disneyland, has slashed its general fund budget forecast by 30% because of the plummeting tax revenues. Local residents say the state should let Disneyland reopen.
I can't believe it because Florida's flourishing and they're still trying to do their best, but California is just ridiculous. These theme parks are just getting hammered.
Yeah, they should be open. And they should be open because they're really hurting a lot of people by being closed.
The president of Disneyland says they've proven around the world that they can safely reopen.
So difficult. That's the latest business updates for this week. Thanks so much for watching.